Perfect. Okay, good afternoon again to everyone, and thank you very much to all participants to join this webinar today. We are having Emily Feuerherm from University of Michigan-Flint. She is Associate Professor of Linguistics, and she will be talking about the topic of today, writing a personal statement. It will be very, very useful and beneficial for everyone that is trying to send an application at US institution. My name is Marta Beltran, one of the advisors in Mexico City for Education USA. My colleague Yandy Reynoso is also an advisor in Mexico City. And first, I want to take the chance to explain to all of you a little bit about Education USA, to talk about us, the program. And please, Emily, if we can go to the, thank you. Well, maybe some of you already know what Education USA is, but well, we are a great network of advising centers worldwide. And we are part of the Department of State, and we are part of the Bureau of Cultural and Educational Affairs. So we are part of the US government. And in Mexico, we are around 26 advising centers. As I said, one of my colleagues, Yandy Reynoso, and myself, we are located in Mexico City, and we have many other colleagues around the world and in Mexico through these 26 advising centers in Mexico only. So if anyone here is living in another state or even living in another country, because we are, as I said, a great network worldwide, you can find an advisor that can help you directly when everything is open again, because through this contingency, we are working virtually and remotely all the time right now. Our audiences are, of course, students, everyone who wants to study in a program, either undergraduate or graduate program in the US. In an institution, in any institution, university in the US. We are having as well contribution and collaboration with representatives of higher education institutions locally and in the US, and with non-governmental organizations. As I said, we are part of the Department of State. We are part of the government of the US. We are not working like with specific universities. We are open to all universities and to have collaboration with all universities in US, and that will be your choice at the end, based on your interests and your programs. And well, the main activities that we have as advisors is precisely give you guidance, provide you all information, accurate information, complete as possible, all resources online and also materials that we can have to you. So you can complete this application process. And through the whole process, we will give advice totally free. Everything will be free, and we are not having any cost. Our main activities are in-center, outreach, and virtual. In-center, when we have the possibility to be at the offices, we will be located, I mean Education USA offices, we will be located in American spaces. In Mexico City, in our case, we are located in Benjamin Franklin Library, which is part of the US Embassy. And there we can give informational sessions. So it's open to all public, free. They can go to the library, use the resources like the books and guides. We have workshops as well. Outreach is when we go, we have participation at mobility fairs. We go directly to some local institutions to provide information to their students interested in go and study in the US, and also provide presentations and workshops. And virtual activities is like these webinars, virtual fairs as well. And more than ever, like right now, because of this situation, we are working with just webinars. So we invite all of you to be to keep participating in our social media, so you can see all the webinars that we are offering to you that could be of your interest. And now I will pass the word to Emily so she can talk more about this interesting topic of today. Thank you.
Thank you, Marta, and thank you, Yandi, for inviting me here. I'm so pleased to be able to join you virtually in this case. I am in my home in Michigan at the moment. We are sheltering in place here. The University of Michigan has moved everything online, and it really has given me the opportunity to connect with you all in this new and different format, new for me anyway. So I'm very pleased to be able to join you today to talk to you a little bit about writing, and specifically about writing your application and writing your personal statement to graduate schools. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to take you step by step through some of the things that you should be thinking about when you're preparing to write your personal statement. Now, my background is that I work in the English department as an associate professor of linguistics, and I teach writing, I teach English to speakers of other languages, and I also teach linguistics. So this is not my first time working with EducationUSA. I came and did a presentation just like this, but in person in the beautiful Mexico City last year. And so that I couldn't come in person this year is certainly a disappointment, but I'm very glad to be here with you virtually. So what we're going to talk about first is we're going to start with preparation. So we'll talk a little bit about what a personal statement is, how it fits within the rest of the admissions process for any institution. I'm going to talk very generally, and then I'm going to help towards the end with a practice example. So we'll start out really generally with some questions to ask yourself, some directions for how to do the research to do a really good job with your personal statement, and then the writing process and thinking about how to brainstorm and outline what to include and what. Some of the things that we're going to be talking about are things to ask yourself, things to think about. Great. Okay, if we could go back one slide. Yes, excellent. Or two slides, actually. Go back one more. Yes, there we go. Okay. So the personal statement is a written description of one's achievements, interests, etc., included as part of an application or a job or to an educational program. So the skills that you learn for writing a personal statement to submit to a college are very similar to the types of writing skills that you're going to need as well for when you write applications to jobs or to your future career. So in general, they may be there are different kinds of statements. They may be a more general statement, or they may be responses to more specific questions. So these are going to be contextual and based depending on what the institution is asking from you individually. Okay, even within the same university, you may have programs asking for different things. So be sure that you're looking at a program that you are trying to apply to. Next slide. So some of the questions that you can ask yourself prior to writing are thinking about just really reflecting on yourself. What about you is special, unique, distinctive, or maybe even impressive about your life story. Some of the things that universities are very interested in is if you are a first-generation student. What that means is if your grandparents and your parents never attended college, so you'll be the first in your family to attend college, that's something that makes you special or unique or distinctive, especially if you're applying to grad school and you're the first in your family to do so. So maybe there's also different kinds of issues that you've had to overcome, personal issues, maybe you have a disability, or maybe you went through a foster care system. It could be any kind of things, but you want to think really a lot about what's special or unique to you. And number two, you should think about what are some of the details that could help the committee, because these are all read by a group of people, that could help the committee better understand you and set you apart from other applicants. So you want to stand out, you want to be original, and you'd be surprised at how common some of the things are that people say. You know, I did well in high school, or I did well in college. You know, I'm passionate about insert whatever your graduate program is, whether it's chemistry or math or English or whatever. So you have to think about interesting ways to tell that story to help set you apart from other applicants. You could also think about when you became interested in the field, what you've learned about it through your experiences and maybe about yourself as well, that's stimulated your interest or reinforced your conviction that you were well suited to the field. So what insights have you gained? Now, as you'll see later on in the discussion, if you have had the same passion since you were a child, cataloging that throughout your entire life may not be as impactful as a time when you experienced something that was really significant and maybe reinforced or changed the way you thought about your field. Usually, you want to keep your stories, your narrative, to things that have happened only in the past few years. So maybe not long stories about your childhood, but you could provide some small information about your childhood if it were really necessary. Number four, you should use this statement to help explain any gaps or any discrepancy in your academic record. So, you know, I think this year with the pandemic is going to be one of those kinds of experiences where a lot of students will see a drop in their grades, for example, because, you know, they had to move online and maybe they didn't have all the technology that they needed, or, you know, just had to continue working or got sick or who knows what. So, so people are going to be really pretty thoughtful about if you have a drop in your grades, you know, in the winter or the spring semester of 2020. Now, that would be something that we would expect from a lot of people, but let's say you had to take a break or interrupt your schooling, or you had to, you know, there was some other kind of gap or some other, maybe a bad grade or something that you feel that you need to explain a little bit. I wouldn't spend a lot of time doing that, but it is the opportunity where you can contextualize that within your story, within your narrative. And if you're not familiar with all of these shorthands, the LSAT is the test that you take if you want to become a lawyer. GRE, you may be familiar with, those are the graduate requisite exam. That's the standardized exam that you take if you are planning to study in the United States. And GPA stands for grade point average. So for the most part, you know, a lot of institutions have a minimum GPA requirement for your undergraduate if you're going to be applying for graduate school. Number five, you can also be thinking about what skills. So maybe you have some great leadership skills, you're a great communicator, you're really analytical. What are some of the skills that you possess? Now, these may be really important then when you go on to grad school, because if you're doing research, you certainly want to have analytical skills as well as communicative skills, because you'll probably have to write. Writing skills, that's another important skill that you'll want to demonstrate through the writing of this statement as well. Now, last one, number 6, what are the most compelling reasons that you can give for the admissions committee to be interested in you? So these committees are going to be reading hundreds, maybe thousands of applications. And so you want yours to be able to stand out, and you want it to stand out in a good way, right? You don't want it to stand out because there's spelling mistakes or some other issue with it. So at the very bottom, I don't know if you can really see this, but they're Purdue OWL, so the University of Purdue, it's their online writing lab, has a lot of additional resources if you want to think more about questions like this as you're planning and preparing to write your statement. Ready for the next slide. So the next thing is, before you even start writing, you really want to do the research, and so that you can write a really specific and tailored statement to whatever school that you are applying for. And you probably shouldn't use the same personal statement for different applications. You'll want to change them and tailor them at least slightly to match each institution or each program that you're applying for. So for example, I've given you a picture here from the website at University of Michigan-Flint, looking at why UM-Flint, looking at the kinds of courses that you may be taking, looking at what the curriculum has, who the people are that you'll be working with, who are the professors, what are their research interests, how is the program set up, and is this going to fit well with your goals? So there may also be opportunities to connect directly through, for example, webinars, as I have circled there, the MBA webinar. You may be able to reach out to student services as well. You may want to look at the social media output from that program, that department, or the institution as a whole. But usually any institution that you're looking at will have multiple social media sites, and you can find one that is tailored to your interests. You can also request to speak with an advisor, and some institutions will even have opportunities for you to speak with current students. So at the University of Michigan-Flint, we have international student ambassadors, for example. So not only can you get an idea of what it's like by connecting with advisors or professors or others, but you can even get the experience of other international students and what their experiences are directly from them. So it's one of the benefits of institutions like University of Michigan-Flint that offer these kinds of options. And it's a great way for you to kind of get more information about the institution and make sure that the institution is a right fit for you. Because you want to know that first before you even bother with the application process, because they are kind of long and difficult to get through, especially if you're applying to multiple schools. There's also a lot of personal statement examples that are available online, and so you can get an idea of what they look like if that's something that you're interested in. Can we go on to the next slide, please? So before you start writing fully, you're going to want to do some brainstorming and outline. Getting organized is really helpful. So there's lots of different ways that you can brainstorm depending on your interest and depending on how it is that you like to write. So maybe you prefer writing, like free writing as part of your brainstorm, or maybe you prefer speaking with other people and talking about your ideas or stories that you could include. Also, that researching part that I was talking about, and just personal reflection. Now, if you do like to create an outline, you can see on the right-hand side of your screen, there is an outline that is designed for you. So this is particularly a good outline if you're writing a statement of purpose or a statement of intent. As you can see within that first paragraph, that why am I a good fit for the program is really thinking about your purpose of why are you applying to that program. And then the rest of the questions are really showing your purpose and your intent. And this is a little bit different than what you would write if you were writing a more personal statement. So this design outline is great for a statement of purpose. Again, these have to do with your goals. But if you're being asked to write something that is a personal statement, that personal narrative is going to be really the important part. And so that should be more of a story. So it may not fit in the traditional kind of outline like you see here with the first, second, third, fourth paragraph, etc., answering particular questions. Instead, with a personal statement, you want it to be more of a narrative. You want to tell a story. So you would design your outline in order to tell that story. And through the act of storytelling, you become very interesting to your reader. You're demonstrating aspects of your personality and also some of your achievements. Now, one of the things that you absolutely, positively should not do is write a list or bullet points about all of your accomplishments. That will be included in the form that you have to fill out or in some other way in your application. But it is not appropriate to list out your accomplishments in your personal statement or even your statement of purpose. Now, creating an outline can really help to organize your response before you start writing. And it's very, very important to be focused and concise in your writing because you don't have a lot of space. These statements are not long. They're only usually 500, maybe 1,000 words. I don't think I've seen any more than 1,500 words. So you need to be very focused and very concise in your writing. Next slide. So if you're going to tell a story, if you're writing your personal statement, the narrative, you want to tell a story. Even if you're writing your statement of purpose or your intent, it can be more interesting and more engaging for your reader to really hear about a story. It helps them to understand who you are and what you're about. So when you want to think of a story that you can tell from a particular angle, right? It should be a relevant angle. It should be focused on whatever the prompt is asking. You should have specifics and details, and it's also really okay to, and you should be really open, authentic. You can even be vulnerable in these discussions. You know, it's not the case that you have to write about all of your accomplishments and seem like the perfect student or the perfect applicant. That's not what gets you in. What does get you in is being authentic, being reflective, being even, as I said, vulnerable in your story, and sharing things that are honest and that really give a sense of who you are. So talking about what you know, don't try to impress everybody. Tell people what you know. Tell people who you are, and do so authentically and honestly. And as well, show that you have done your research, that you know about the program and that you're excited to work through the curriculum that they have outlined for you. You're excited about some of the opportunities to engage with the faculty, with other students, maybe with research, or any other aspect that makes that institution seem really special to you and what makes you want to go there. Also, it's really important for you to concentrate on your opening paragraph. I cannot tell you when you have to read hundreds or thousands of these statements make a really big impact. But if it's not interesting from the very first paragraph, from the very first sentence even, then it could be not as focused on, right? Your reader, if you're not engaging them straight away, then you've already lost them. So you really want to have a great opening sentence, a great opening paragraph that draws your reader in and makes them want to continue reading your statement. Also, avoid cliches. These get used way too often. So, a cliche would be kind of like these overly used statements. You also want to avoid controversial subjects and very early accomplishments. So focusing on just the past few years is better than focusing on something that happened when you were a child. If you accomplished something when you were really young and it put you on a track, you don't really want to talk too much about that because that's who you were. And the reader wants to know who you are now, not who you were as a child. So focus on mostly the accomplishments from the past few years. Again, there's usually space to write out those earlier accomplishments in other forms. Okay, I think we can move on to the next slide now. This is the really, really important part, the writing and especially the revising. So you definitely want to give yourself enough time to do that writing and do multiple revisions. Do not wait until the last minute. I think for the coming year, most applications are going to be due if you want to start in the fall. I know some institutions, like UM-Flint, is still accepting applications now, but there's other institutions that their applications are already long gone, and their application cycle starts in the fall. So if that's the case, if you're trying to go to an institution that only lets students come in at the fall semester for their graduate studies, and especially if you want to be considered for scholarships or grants, you definitely want to get your applications ready to go early on. So give yourself enough time and don't wait until the last minute. It's also helpful to make sure that you know what every institution is that you're going to apply to and that you know exactly what they're asking for. Like I said, you probably won't be able to have just one single statement of purpose or one single personal statement that you can send out to all of these different institutions. They're going to be asking for different things. So putting together a list or a table where you outline each of those things alongside with the deadlines by which you need to have those in, that can really help you to make sure that you have enough time and that you're not waiting until the last minute. Now, additionally, after your first draft, you should reread and edit several times for both content and grammar. It's a great idea, especially if you can have someone else read it for you, help you edit it, think about the way that you're structuring the content and making sure that your grammar is flawless. Again, especially within that first sentence or the first paragraph. If there are errors in grammar that in the first sentence or the first paragraph, you're going to have a much harder time drawing the reader in and making them interested in your work. So make sure that you have that as well. Now, after you've meticulously self-edited, asked for feedback from others, then it's always a good idea to just set it aside, come back, and only submit after many, many revisions. So depending on how quickly you write and how much help and support you have. That may take you, a week, it may take you a month, it may take you several months. So make sure that you're giving yourself plenty of time to revise, get feedback, and get those additional revisions done. Ready for the next slide. All right, so I wanted to share with you just some information about University of Michigan-Flint. And this is kind of a practice example to be thinking about how you might write your own personal statement by giving you some information that you can connect maybe personally to the University of Michigan. So the university was founded in 1956. It's part of the larger University of Michigan. So University of Michigan has 3 campuses, one in Ann Arbor, one in Flint, and one in Dearborn. Our particular institution is particularly well known for graduate programs in engineering, in physical therapy, nursing, and business. So we have some really excellent programs in those at our institution in Flint. We're also a small institution at the Flint campus with only just over 7,000 students. But we also have a large number of international students with over 40 different countries represented. We have nationally ranked programs, and the Princeton Review named us Best in the Midwest for over 16 years. We have, as far as undergraduate majors, over 120 undergraduate majors. We have bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, and PhDs that we offer at the institution. One of my favorite facts about University of Michigan-Flint is that we have a very small student to faculty ratio on our campus. Now, if you look at Ann Arbor, that's the larger campus, you'll see a much larger faculty student ratio. So that means with only 14 students for every 1 professor, that I know my students very, very well. We work closely together. They have my cell phone number. We meet outside of classes. It's a very close and tight-knit society that we have built in the community, which is University of Michigan-Flint. And additionally, because we have all the resources from the other 2 institutions, from our other 2 campuses, we have a huge alumni network, biggest in the world, in fact, with 580,000 plus alumni. So if there's anything here that makes you think, oh yeah, that's interesting to me, then think about then how you would integrate that into your statement of purpose or intent, or into your personal statement. We're also a small city, and so if you like a kind of slower pace instead of the big city, that's something else that you can consider. Geography, right? In the Midwest, we're right next to the Great Lakes, and we have lots of natural resources, so if that's something you're interested in, another thing to consider. And of course, a lot of the auto industry is located right here in Flint. This is where General Motors was founded. And so we have a great history of engineering and of technology here too. All right, I can't remember if there's one more slide or if this is the end. Andy, do you wanna? Oh, there you go. So that is it for the presentation part. I know it looks like there's a few chats, but I also wanted to give you this information here. So if you're interested in connecting more with University of Michigan-Flint, there's a bunch of different ways that you can do this. And so let's see. Okay, so looking at the Zoom chat, if you haven't already, feel free to add to the Zoom chat any questions that you have. So one question is, when should I start writing my personal statement? That's from Maria. So thanks, Maria. That's a great question. That's really going to depend on how long it takes you to write. whenever I have to write a personal statement, for example, if I'm applying to a grant, or if I still apply to things even though I'm an associate professor. So the skills that I learned in this, I still use. Whenever I have to start writing something like that, I usually give myself at least a month to write it. That gives me time to do the research that I need to do. And it also is really helpful for me to reflect on all of the different aspects that I need to reflect on in order to write a really good statement, in order to find the story that I want to tell in my statement. Montse asks, is there any specific format, colors, etc.? So in some cases, you may be submitting a personal statement that is a separate document. Many times now, because so much of what we do is digital and online, whatever you're going to be submitting is going to be right in whatever form that your application takes. Now, if you do have to submit some Word document or PDF, there's not a specific format, but I would say to use Times New Roman 12-point font, or some other very easy to read font. So don't get real creative. You'll want to give it a title if it's a separate document. Again, so if it's done in a Word document, you'll give it a title. You'll give it double spacing and have the 1-inch borders around every side. Indent when you start a new paragraph, and that should be the format. So as though you're writing an essay, essentially. Colors, I wouldn't use a whole lot of color. I would just, I don't think you can usually add pictures or anything like that, as fun as that would be. But unfortunately, it's a pretty dry kind of a document, and so it should look professional in that way, using the kind of standard academic writing that you would normally use for something like an essay. From Carol, we have, how long should be a personal statement? Great question. They're going to be different depending on who you're applying to. So as I said, I think some of the shortest ones that I see are anywhere around 500 words. 500 words is pretty short. It's about a page. Now, if you're asked multiple questions, so maybe the application asks you to respond to multiple questions rather than just writing a single personal statement. In that case, they may be shorter, but they're going to say how many words you should use, and you should plan to use all of those words. Again, that means revising. What works best for me is to write something that's too long, and then when I go back and revise, cut and cut and cut and take out anything that is unnecessary. So, for example, if you have a sentence starting with, I think that, you could just take the I think that out, right? Those are words that you don't need to include because it's your personal statement. They know it's what you're thinking. Next one is from Daniela. What would be a great entry for my personal statement? So it's going to really depend on your personal experiences and what you feel connected to when you're looking at the program that you want to apply to. So what is it that gets you excited? What are the things that make you really excited about studying in a particular program? That's going to be an important thing for you to think about. And that's going to be when you let through your authentic excitement, passion, and, as I said, vulnerability, right? You're not a Superman or a Superwoman. So let in that vulnerability and make it as authentic as possible. That's going to be a great entry for your personal statement. I like to start a personal statement like this with an anecdote. So one of the best personal statements that I've read started with a student's experience first experience going abroad, and it had been just recently. And since this person was going to be studying abroad, the idea that they were sharing this really vulnerable moment in their first experience traveling abroad really helped me to understand them as a person. So an anecdote is a great start to your personal statement. The next one, should I focus my statement in professional or academic achievements for an MBA? So I think it's going to depend. Now, if you can craft a narrative, a story where you can integrate both your professional achievements and your academic achievements into one coherent narrative, that's the goal. Okay? It shows that you're a professional, it shows that you're mature, but it also shows that you are dedicated to your academic career and achievements as well. So, you know, it will depend on another thing that you can think about. Statements that say something like, I am most proud of, fill in the blank. Something that you are most proud of says a lot about who you are as a person, and it's a great way to highlight professional or academic achievements. Next question is there a personal statement that you've reviewed that you remember well? What did it say? Oh my goodness, I have so many. The ones that really impress me really strike that balance of telling me about a time when they were vulnerable, and also about how they overcame some kind of problem that they faced. So whether that were academic, financial, physical, personal, emotional, like any number of these things. These are really interesting stories to me. I love to hear about how students have overcome something and learned from that experience. And so I just love reading that kind of story. Those ones stick to me the most. I'm also really interested in people who are passionate about social justice, about being a good community member, being a good person to other people. I love hearing stories that also represent that about a person. Those are the students that I really want to work with. Those are the ones that I'm really drawn to. Looks like we have another question here. If I've been involved in several research projects in the past, should I mention it in my personal statement or in my statement of purpose? This is a great question. So I would say that if you're being asked for both a personal statement and a statement of purpose, that you can pick different aspects of your research project to address the goals. So the statement of purpose is going to be about your goals. So you can talk about maybe the things that you learned from the research that you did in the past, whereas your personal statement, maybe here you tell a story about how the research project affected you. So it's basically two different sides of the same coin. On the head side, you're talking about it in relation to how that informs your goals, your purpose, your intent in pursuing additional directions for your career. On the other side of the coin, on the tails side of the coin, you're telling about how that research experience affected you in a more personal way. That's your personal narrative and your personal statement. So if you're being asked for both types, you can tell similar stories from different perspectives. But if you're only asked for one, then I would focus either, if you're the statement of purpose, focus on the goals perspective. And if it's the personal statement, talk about it from a more personal perspective in that case. The next question, this is a great one. Can we use jargon on our statement of purpose? So in many cases, the reader is going to be an educated, knowledgeable person, but because any discipline has multiple subdisciplines, using a lot of jargon may not be the best idea. And the reason is because, sometimes it's difficult to talk about what you do without any jargon, right? So if you're a chemist, you may need to use some basic jargon to talk about your work as a chemist. But on the other hand, you don't want to go showing off your knowledge of disciplinary jargon, because it could be that the committee that's reading your statement is coming from either different disciplines. That's sometimes the case, especially with smaller institutions. Or it could be that they're coming from a different subdiscipline where that particular jargon that you have chosen to use is maybe not one that they use on a regular basis. So, I would limit the amount of jargon to only what you need to use. So writing clearly and simply is better than something that's really dense or hard to read or academic. Remember, the people who are reading this are reading hundreds or thousands of these, so you want to make it easy for them to read and easy for them to understand. That means avoiding unnecessary jargon in that case. Great question though, Maria. Joshua says, should I write about a tutor with whom I would like to work in the department? That's a great question. Now, this is more common if you're applying for PhD programs, much less common for any master's graduate programs, and very uncommon if you're applying for an undergraduate program. So if you're applying for a PhD, recognizing that there's somebody that you want to work with because you've been really inspired by their work is a great idea. Showing that you've done your research as well with who's in the department is also great. But let me tell you as well, don't get stuck on the idea that you're going to work with a particular person in a department, because that matching process once you arrive is going to take a little bit of time. So going in with an idea of who you want to work with is great, because that shows you've done your research and you're excited about working in a particular program, a particular department. But don't spend too much time on that, because there's also a process where that professor has to accept you as well as the person that they want to work with. So it's a bit of a delicate process to do. Yes, go ahead and say who is inspiring you from a department, but I wouldn't go too far into depth about how you want to work with them moving forward. Inspiration is a great way of striking that balance, though. So talk about who's inspiring you and why you want to go to that program, more than the fact that you want to work with that person. It's a way of getting around it linguistically, but still saying the same thing that you want to say. I hope I haven't missed any questions. I've come to the end of what I see on the chat box.
Emily, we do have a few other questions from my end.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay, some of you already have responded already. Monse is asking if there are any specific format, colors, etc.
So the format is really not specific. In many of the applications, you'll just have a little text box in the website that you apply through, and that's where you're going to type your answer. I would recommend, rather than typing it into those text boxes, that you write it in a Word document or a Google document first, so that you can go through the process of revising before you submit. But if you do have to upload a separate document, making it in a Word document with a title and writing it as though it's like an essay is ideal. No extra colors, just a very simple, easy to read font, 1-inch borders around the document. Double spaced is often appreciated, although single space is probably fine too. So usually whenever you open a Word document, it's automatically formatted with a good format for you. So unless there are specifics to the program that you're applying to, where they're asking for a particular format, generally that's not something that I've seen. And they usually are just asking you to enter your statement into a text box that's on their application form when it's digital.
Thank you. Let's see. Nelly's asking, I guess when you were talking about past few years, she's asking how many year embraces past few years? Is there a recommendation time, like the past 5 or 6 years, or 2 or 3 years?
Good question. So, I've seen different ways of this happening, and some of that depends on if you have already graduated and how long you've been out of school. So if you have just graduated and you're applying, or you're about to graduate, maybe you haven't graduated from undergrad studies yet and you're thinking about applying to graduate school, then the past 5 years, 4 years, 5 years should be fine. And I think that's true as well if you have spent a couple of years after undergraduate working. But if you've spent 5, 10, 15 years since you went to undergraduate, you may want to mention that and give a little context to that. So it's going to depend somewhat on your own personal experiences. The closer you are to having graduated, the fewer years you want to include in your narrative. And the longer it has been since you graduated, the more context you're going to need about why you want to go back to graduate school. So I'd say actually keep it to 4 years if you are about to graduate or have recently graduated. And if it's been a longer time since you were in college, then give some more context, give some more years. Great question, though.
One more question. Jaime is asking, is it okay to talk about an obstacle that I could encounter during my studies, but I think I know how to handle?
Oh, absolutely. Especially if your experience with that obstacle, if you didn't know how to handle it when you first were presented with that obstacle and you figured it out for, either by using the tools that were given to you or by being very creative, or maybe you didn't even do a good job with that obstacle the first time around. And now you think you would do it differently. Any of those shows real reflective thinking. And in addition to the other things that I've said about what draws me in when I have to read letters like these, demonstrating that somebody is really reflecting deeply on their experiences, connecting it to the state of the world, or connecting it to other aspects outside of themselves, maybe in the discipline, connecting with other people, connecting with society, connecting with theories from their discipline. Any of those are very interesting, but really, if you're demonstrating good reflective thinking, then you're in a good place in your writing, for sure. Are there other questions?
Yes, just I think one more. Felix is asking, he says, I want to apply to a PhD program on linguistics even though I do not hold an MA yet. How specific should I be on the questions I want to do research on and the professors I want to work with?
Wow, that is a great question. And you know what? It reminds me of where I was. So when I was applying for graduate school and applying for PhD programs, I was very much in the same position. So some of the things that you can be thinking about when you look at linguistics programs specifically, think about what it is that draws you to linguistics. If you're interested in sociolinguistics, look for programs that have a lot of interest in sociolinguistics. If you're interested in more formal linguistics, then be thinking about that. Be thinking about who's in the different departments and what it is that really strikes your fancy about linguistics. And although I'm talking about linguistics because that was the question and I'm also a linguist, that goes for all of you. You know, if you are interested in chemistry or math, then look at what kind of chemistry, what kind of math is being taught and researched, importantly, researched in these programs. So all of the programs will have a lot of information, and if there are particular researchers that you have found very drawn to, find out where they are. Now, at the same time, if you're looking at some of the larger universities, so this would be, for example, like a University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. That's our main campus, and it has, I forget, 20,000 students or something. That's going to be a very different experience from what you would get at the Michigan campus. So be thinking about how much contact you want with your professors. Smaller institutions, you'll likely have more contact. Bigger research institutions, you'll have more opportunities for groundbreaking research with famous professors. So, but they may have less time for you, and the education that you get, maybe you may have to be more in charge of your own learning in those environments, because bigger institutions means that it's kind of easier for you to get lost or to build those it's more difficult to build really meaningful connections with the faculty. So especially if you're in a big department. Not that it's impossible by any means, not by any means. And especially when you're looking at PhD programs, I mean, you're going to be building close relationships and networks with your faculty. And it's really important to build those close relationships. So you have to take a lot of time to do that work as well. Larger institutions also often will give you more opportunities for teaching assistantships, maybe even research assistantships. And that may be important, especially as you're thinking about how you're going to pay for your graduate education. There's lots of different aspects to be thinking about and looking beyond just the department, beyond just who you're going to be working with, and looking at the larger institution, its location, the different kinds of support that it offers for students, those are all really important things that you should be taking note of as you are choosing the institution that you want to apply for or that you want to attend. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Emily. There is another question.
Good.
How could you justify a not so good grade in your GPA without making an excuse?
Right. So, I mean, I think it probably depends on the circumstances, on the individual circumstances of why you got a not so good grade. And also, what did you learn from that experience of getting a grade that was not very good? How did that change your behavior moving forward? And as well, I know that there are students that I have worked with that maybe started out without a very strong direction. They didn't maybe know or find their niche, didn't know what it was that they wanted to do at first, and their grades suffered for it. When they found their passion, or perhaps in the courses that they took that were in their discipline that they were passionate about, if you did better in those courses, then you can kind of highlight that and explain how your passion drives you. It could be that there were other complicating factors that came in. Maybe you were sick, or had experienced some kind of loss, and that disrupted a semester's worth of grades. I think that is another way that you could be thinking about helping somebody understand you as a person who has other things going on in their life besides just school, right? And so opening up, being that authentic self, letting yourself be a little vulnerable, but most importantly, reflecting on what you have learned from that will keep you from making an excuse, and instead focusing a little bit more on what you've learned. I see I have another question here about universities and scholarships. Yes, University of Michigan does have scholarships for international students, both at the larger campus and at my campus as well. Those scholarships you can apply for. You can find out about them through our International Center. And while they won't cover the full cost of tuition, they can help. And furthermore, beyond just scholarships, like I said, other kinds of assistantships are great ways to find additional support. So, for example, this year I have been working with an international student from Nigeria as my graduate student research assistant. Now, he is in the master's program for computer science at my institution at University of Michigan-Flint, but he works with me in the English department doing data input. So, and we've built a really great relationship. He gets paid for the work that he does for me. He's, spending, I think, 6 hours a week working for me, and he gets paid for that. And so that helps him to offset the cost of his studies. Other institutions will have other kinds of assistantships. So that one is a research assistantship. He works with me on research, and we're building that research out to be something that we're going to publish together, which is really exciting. And I think that will help him in his future as well. So more than just the financial part of it, he's also getting experience with me. Teaching assistantships are also very common. We don't have many of them at the University of Michigan-Flint, but there are many in Ann Arbor. So the larger institution you go to, the more opportunities you'll have for teaching assistantships. Though large or small, you'll have research assistantships available if you're in a graduate program. Now, connecting with admissions offices, connecting with graduate programs, and finding out how common these are is certainly in your benefit. So in addition to asking any university that you're interested in or applying for if they have scholarships for international students, asking them alongside of that, do you have assistantships, research assistantships, or teaching assistantships that can help you offset the cost of your education dramatically and give you lots of really great experience? You're very welcome, Maria. Are there other questions?
Thank you. It seems that there is no more questions. Anyhow, all participants that want to reach you, if anyone can come up with other questions, can contact you. Or also, we now are seeing our Education USA contact information. If you have any other question about Education USA, and you can visit our official website, educationusa.state.gov. This social media and email address is directed to Mexico City Advising Center. But anyhow, if you are located in another place, we can also direct your email to respective advising center. Our apologies for any inconvenience at the beginning of this webinar. And the video recording will be sent to all registered participants, and you will also be able to find it through Mexico City's YouTube channel. We invite all of you, the participants, to be also to keep in touch and to see our coming events in social media. As I said, you can see all data on screen. And if any of you would like more personal advising through this admissions process, you can ask us about one-on-one session, so it's more personalized advising. If there is no more questions, then thank you very much, Emily, for this great session, for our collaboration. Thank you all participants for joining us today, and hoping to see all of you in other webinars. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. And thank you for everybody who's joined. Please do contact me or contact Education USA. They can get you in touch with me if you do have more questions. So yeah, it's been wonderful. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Emily. We will end then this session and see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.